Emotion yet peace, ignorance yet knowing, passion yet serenity, appearance of chaos yet harmony, birth, death, and some will say rebirth. All these play in the force. Harmony, this is the Paladin channel. Today I'm going to read some letters. They were comments in the sections, and they're up for anybody to read, and I'm reading them as they were written, and I hope I don't mispronounce any names. This is Mike Grace, author and poet. May the Force guide you, Carl. We miss you on Facebook and at the Jedi Church. Your wisdom and calm have always been important and appreciated. That was why such responsibilities happen. I find the idea that you felt you were inconsistent or somehow a fraud dubious. You have always struck me as being similar to Thich Nhat Hanh, or His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama and such, a voice of peace and kindness. I personally look forward to hearing more of your ideas and following your next leg of the journey. Hopefully, as someone aiming at a similar journey of sharing practical compassion and action, we can have an open dialogue. Michael Grace, Knight of the JP. Well, thank you for the wonderful words and thoughts, Michael. I'm nothing like those men. They, in fact, have in measure inspired me. I'd even been to His Holiness the Dalai Lama's North American establishment in Ithaca, New York, and it was my privilege to meditate there with the monks who attend the building. And there was also a time when His Holiness had flown into the airport at Ithaca, and I saw it on TV. And in my journeys, I stopped there and stood in the area thinking, that wonderful man was here. And I find his persistence as well as that of Thich Nhat Hanh's. He had just experienced a parinirvana. That these people as guides are here to remind us of certain things. And occasionally they surface in our awareness. They have in mind offering what they offer, always with kindness, always with persistence, always with these wonderful, sagacious, and compassionate ideas. If I am a reflection of these, it's a dim reflection, but better that than nothing. Thank you, Michael. Ellie Viltermuth, you have helped me learn while you were admin. Thank you. Face myself I did and return to the path on my failure to face my fear. It took me 40 years to learn a simple lesson of self-compassion. Now learning to not other fellow human beings is stronger in me. May the Force be with you. Well, I think that the Force was with you, Ellie. It's certainly something when you can regard other people in positive ways instead of the typical ways that we do. And if I help a single person, if I've done months or years of efforts and just one person has helped in that direction, the person always does the work, as you see. That is more than worth it. There's an old friend and acquaintance, Vishwa Jay. He's known by various names. I've simply called him Jay over time. He's certainly been a stalwart in Jedi circles and very much an influencer, a teacher, a master, and I have the privilege to have befriended one of his students who has gone on to be a master and is very influential in Jedi circles. And she, in turn, helps many people. So this is the kind of succession that I talk about, this teacher to student, the earnest student then going on and becoming another teacher. It's how things are done among us, and it's traditional in all kinds of groups, and it sees its fulfillment here. Jay actually had two things. I came back to the first video just to comment about how much I love your videos. The effort of relating the experience shows. So glad to see you using the experiential perspective to relate. It works well. Keep up the good work. This was really the good stuff, being correct application of life's wisdom without worrying about religion or anything other than experience. I'll ask my question in a separate comment. Jay's always been kind and he's not prone to flattery. But I'm humbled by your words, my friend. It's but you go on. I have a question. What is the cause for people not wanting to attend to compassion? We can give a boilerplate answer like ego is responsible. But what's your opinion regarding the actual process that convinces us that compassion is less powerful than the ills of the world you've listed? It's a tough thing to answer for sure, but I happen to know with nearly 100% certainty you're at least competent to express your own opinion on that. Compassion less powerful. As a lot of you know, I have come from a tradition of Vajrayana, and it was the Nyingma, or the Ancient Ones tradition. Yes, there's actually Ancient Ones. My teacher was very firm in saying many times that compassion is our very essence. Sitting there and listening, he sits in a chair that's prominent in the room. Nobody sits above him. And he comes to his chair before talking to any group. And he sits there silently for a while. And I found, it took me years to find out why. He's actually performing a kind of a ritual, if you will, but it's a matter where he will sit there and say to himself, I am here to continue this wonderful teaching, but I myself am not worthy to continue this. But despite that, for the sake of this, I do it. It begins with humility. It begins with the subtle. It begins with something that's like the calm that's in the lake, even though the winds are making it unnavigable on top. Compassion is that. But to get to the compassion, my experience is that I have to steer myself back to it. That it is the calm that reveals it. Beautiful. The world has got its pulls, its thrusts, its directions of this, that, and the other thing. A lot of it contradictory, a lot of it at odds with all kinds of things. To achieve this has to be taken out. To do this must come to ruin. To do this, these must die. That's been the activity of the world since life began. And if we were to look at the world before life, we would see something very apparently chaotic. But it was all coming together following physical laws, which made for the present. We are all rooted in this past. We came up as matters of development, of selection, of evolution, of learning. There was a struggle. Each one of us is a struggle. Each one of us is a struggle, and we're faced with all these things that the world has, and some of it is rather abrasive and even violent, and some of it has given itself to us as an appeal. Come to the dark side. We've got the cookies. Your current meme, but it's true. It's perfectly true. It does look swell from a certain point of view. For that to drown out compassion, the mind is untrained in regarding compassion. The mind goes to compassion when suddenly you might see a baby take a terrible fall. Or, in the case of my father, he had fallen and broken his hip, and all I could feel was this terrible compassion. That is, his pains were my own. The compassion will come through, but if we're so used to our habitual thinking about the world as a wonderful place that offers promise of what? You're not going to get out alive. Whatever you've collected in life, all these swell things, you can have the most marvelous things. They might bury me with this, but I'm not taking it with me. Not a thing. All that I have left, as Odin said, is my reputation on the lips of others. These kinds of things were reasons for me, guided by the Nyingma traditions, to look at compassion as something viable in the face of that. Something I've always had, something you've got, something everybody else has. Even the loudest negative person that we've seen on boards, in groups, they show up at gatherings like poison ivy. Even these people have compassion, but do they pay attention to it? I've even been in an argument with a couple of prominent people. It was in Force Academy. They were going back and forth with me about how compassion was valueless. It's got no place. There was this practically a warrior ideal. It was the idea that, yes, we're here for good. Yes, we're here for defense. But compassion? Why? What good is it? Spent several minutes going back and forth, writing several paragraphs. I believe I ended that. All I said was, I'll leave you with one thought. Where compassion is, the dark side is not. If we do look at things as a separation of this and that, light and dark, compassion and its opposites, it wouldn't be simply dispassion. Compassion is what helps, what seeks to help, what would help. Dispassion and these other things would seek to not care for that. It's irrelevant. When it does become worthless and irrelevant, there is the gate to harm. Sometimes we can be intoxicated by the sheer feeling of things. I knew a perfectly good woman who became a nurse, and then she had fallen into bad company whom she had known earlier and decided to cook meth with her partner, with children around. They were arrested, but that was never the end of their follies. But they thought that doing this criminal stuff was a cool thing. They seemed to enjoy it, even though they were creating poison and basically poisoning members of society. That was where their thrust was, and still is. I understand the man is in and out of jail, and the woman had fled with her child to Alaska to escape having the child taken from her and so forth. Dark side indeed. This, when you live like that, you have basically your shoulder to look over all the time. Comfort and ease might be some kind of high or a stupor or the rush of doing something that you know is wrong or bad. And sometimes we can get addicted to those things. That will certainly drown out the urgings of compassion. You can feel something compassionate. You can be a part of a crowd that's doing something very uncompassionate. I had seen it at Watkins Glen at a Grand Prix decades ago. People were stoning some poor guy's car, a little truck, a small truck it was, stoning it. And if he hadn't driven out of there, they would have pulled the occupants, this crowd, out of the truck and torched the truck. There were all kinds of husks of burnt vehicles there. And the police eventually had this plan of chain link fences and tear gas to keep that from happening. But crowds will do harmful things to property and even lives that aren't theirs. And when you're in a crowd, that too could be a ticket. Well, I'm doing what everybody else is doing. I'm caught up in this. To be there and rest yourself. That depends on disposition, your connection to right and wrong, your connection to your heart. We like to look at the myth of Star Wars, the perpetual struggle, good and evil. and in my mind, Return of the Jedi, where Luke was going to be killed by the Emperor. And Vader is watching this, and he's looking from his master to his son again and again. And then he makes a choice. Why would he make the choice he did, were it not for compassion? Even under duress, the myth says we can do this. And in real life, I'll talk about reality in another in another video. That too can happen. It depends on your inclination, on your training, how seriously you take compassion, that you feel it. That happens. That always happens. But to become numb to it, that too is a practice. And it's the practice of quite a few. I don't know if I answered your question, Jay, but those were my thoughts. And I hope that all is well with you and Karen and your father. And it is my wish for the Force to be with you all. May Ashla guide you.